Okay, guys. Now we're going to talk about what the war looks like in the Pacific. Remember when we last left off, we went over the battles in Europe, and now we're going to go over the battles in the Pacific. With Japan in the war, that's where and we're also fighting them on a front. That's why we're doing battle on the Pacific side. Get out your papers and pens. Here we go, so you can get all the information that you need for your quiz. So, the Japanese Empire, was much larger than Germany's. You have Hong Kong, French Indochina, Malaya, Burma, Thailand, China, Guam, Wake Island, parts of Alaska. So, Germany found a strong ally in Japan because they owned a lot of land in the world also. But that also meant for us that we had another kind of big booger that we had to fight in Japan. So let's look at some of these battles. You have the Battle of Midway. It's a surprise attack. It's an island that is somewhat north of Hawaii. Americans broke the code that Japan was going to be headed there pretty soon. And Admiral Chetzer Nimitz got there first, our people. And so we kind of set up reinforcements. We were kind of waiting on them because we had broke the code. Douglas MacArthur was there also. June 3rd, 1942, U.S. saw a Japanese fleet and sent torpedo planes and dive bombers before the Japanese could even take off. So it's literally almost like, got you back from Pearl Harbor. We're getting in there and you don't even know what to do. Japan lost 4 of their major aircraft carriers, a cruiser, and 250 planes. And how this is pretty significant to the war because it does begin to turn the tide in the Pacific. And it's low-key our revenge for Pearl Harbor. Battle of Midway, surprise attack. It hurt the Japanese Navy, and it was considered the turning point in the war for the United States. So make sure you know that. It's the turning point of the war in the U.S., especially for the battles in the Pacific, on the Pacific front. The Allies take the offensive, Japan plays defense, and we win. Remember, pause if you need to. I'm going to keep going. Iwo Jima, this location, and you'll see this memorial if you go to DC, location was critical to the U.S. launch of a successful ground invasion. So it was a 1-month battle, March 16th, 1945. The island appeared deserted. And with Iwo Jima, it was actually heavily defended, but from the outside it looked deserted. So it was almost like people were kind of crawling up out of the pits to kind of attack. It was pretty interesting. 20,700 Japanese troops appeared from tunnels and caves and out of nowhere. More than 6,000 Marines die. It was a 1-month battle. That's a lot of deaths in 1 month trying to take this island that was so critical for launching other attacks. Only 200 Japanese survive after we take the island. Iwo Jima. Remember, pause if you need to. Truman now has a choice. We have the Manhattan Project, and we talked about this a little. You might have seen it in some of the previous videos. They have a project. It's called the Manhattan Project, and it's the atomic bomb. Truman wants to end this war quickly because he knows that by the longer it goes, the longer it carries, the more lives he's going to lose. So he has to make a decision about this Manhattan Project with involved Edison and some of the other scientists on whether or not just to decimate Japan and drop a bomb, Hiroshima. This bomb would cost $2 billion to make. We tested it in New Mexico, July of 16th in 1945. And eventually Truman makes the decision. And you're going to be discussing, was this the right decision to make? Because when you drop a bomb, you have citizens that also are affected that are not necessarily a part of the war effort, civilians. July 25th, 1945, Truman orders 2 atomic bombs. He didn't inform the Soviet Union that we were doing this, even though we were working with them. That's another reason why they were mad. Dropping the bomb would create, without their permission, would kind of create tensions between us and the Soviet Union. August 6, 1945, on Enola Gay, we leave Guam. We drop the bomb. It's Little Boy. Hiroshima, which is a important military base in Japan, it's literally blown up in 43 seconds. There are still evidence of how dropping these bombs have affected the areas and people that still live there today, years later. Japan still does not surrender. The goal was if Truman dropped those 2 bombs, Japan would stop. And that would get rid of one of our, foes, and we could fight Germany, but they didn't surrender. So we tried again. 3 days later, we dropped Fat Man on Nagasaki, thinking that hopefully this will get Japan to stop. So 2 bombs. They were ordered on the 25th. They were dropped August 6th. And then again, 3 days later, Little Boy, Fat Man. It killed 200,000 people. We did get some gains from the war. Unemployment was down to 1.2%. Farming was good again. Wars are good for business. Keep that in mind as you grow up. You see sometimes why do people want war? But many lost jobs after the war because, again, those war industries aren't needed. The First Amendment rights were suspended, and Japanese were put in what's called internment camps. And we'll talk about that in a minute. The effects on the War of Women. Women took jobs traditionally held by men, as you saw in the last lesson. Rosie the Riveter became the symbol of women who were coming into the workforce around this time. I'm sure you remember that from the last lesson, so we'll move on. We get the GI Bill, mainly people enrolling or enlisting, in the armed services, so that way they could get education and job training, provide loans for them buying a home or a farm. So now we're giving soldiers incentive to join up the war effort so we can end this war quickly. So those are some of the social impacts that World War II had on the United States. Let's talk about Executive Order 9066. Go ahead and get out your highlighters. As a result of Pearl Harbor, several Americans were scared of Japanese Americans. They were like, your relatives probably had something to do with the dropping of the bomb, and we don't like you. And believe it or not, in 1942, President Roosevelt, before Truman came in, had signed this into law, which forcibly removed Japanese Americans to internment camps. It's not a proud moment in our history. We took Japanese people, moved them out to ghettos, moved them out to camps, and said we considered them dangerous out of fear. Fred Korematsu, I'm probably not saying his name right, challenged this law, saying that it was unconstitutional for American citizens. He said, we did not do this. We did not drop the bomb on Pearl Harbor. Why are you imprisoning us? He took it to court, all the way to the Supreme Court. Please highlight Fred and the court case. You need to know it. And not our proudest moment, but the Supreme Court said, yes, this was justified, moving you guys to internment camps, blaming people that it wasn't technically their fault because of the issues that we were dealing with World War II and the safety. So the United States really did some things that, with this Executive Order 9066, that weren't really good. More battles. We have the Battle of Coral Sea. You'll need to know this one. Please highlight. It's a 4-day World War II skirmish in May of 1942. It marked kind of the first air and sea battle that was taking place here in the Pacific. The Japanese were seeking to control the Coral Sea. The goal in war is to control as much area as you can so you can launch more attacks. When the Japanese landed in the area, they came under attack from aircraft carrier planes and by sea. Although both sides suffered damages to the carriers, the battle left the Japanese without enough planes to foster a ground attack and to land their ground troops. So this really stopped the Axis powers from eventually taking control over Australia. So we're slowly but surely, both in Europe and both in the Pacific, winding this war down. And a lot of that source information came from history.com. So what you need to take from the Battle of Coral Sea, it stopped the Axis powers from controlling Australia, and it's kind of our first land and sea battle. And the Battle of Guadalcanal is August 1942. We have several sea clashes, again, between the Allied and the Japanese forces off the South Pacific, some small Solomon Islands. The main thing you need to take away from this battle, it's a back and forth, it's a sea battle. But as a result, the U.S. Navy built several bases and began to slowly, after this battle, dominate the Pacific front by both land and sea. Make sure you know that. You're now going to take a quiz and do some other activities.